Good morning, and welcome to Bahai's Today. I'm your host, Nadia Etamad, here at Studio 21, brought to you by the Bahai community of Radnor. This program will focus on initiating a conversation on social change and community building. There will be a series of talks regularly with guests from the Bahai community who will share with us their experiences on this journey of making the world a better place for us all. Today I have with us Dr. Kendall Williams. Dr. Williams is a medical doctor as well as a Bahai. He is an associate professor at the University of Pennsylvania, and most recently he is the founder of sifterofdust.org. Dr. Williams, welcome.
Thank you, Nadia. It's great to be here. Honored to be here. I started sifterofdust.org and I'm the editor of the site. Basically to just inform people of the Baha'i faith, and it's based out of Philadelphia. It's based in the main line. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, welcome. So we've been hearing that term Baha'i a lot, but I doubt that a lot of us truly know what that means. So could you tell us a little bit? I know when we planned the show, we just wanted to go over what a Baha'i really was. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I thought that was important to just talk about what the Baha'i faith is because, most people have not heard of it. So I sometimes say it's the most amazing thing that you've never heard of. It's my elevator speech for the Baha'i faith is that the Baha'i faith is an independent world religion that is the newest of the world's religions. There are 7 million Baha'is in over 220 countries. It's the most diverse community of people on the planet.
Wow.
There is only one Baha'i religion. There's not sects of other religions. When I say it's a new independent world religion, so when we think about the various great religions that exist in the world, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and so forth, Christianity obviously has different sects that make up a part of who all sort of worship the revelation of Jesus Christ.
Right.
Islam is the same. The Baha'i faith is an independent religion. It's not a sect of any one of those other faiths. It's an independent revelation that came from God and through the Prophet Baha'u'llah. So Baha'u'llah is to Baha'is what Muhammad is to Muslims and Christ is to Christians. He is the founder of the religion, bringing what he claimed was a new revelation from God. And so Baha'u'llah was a 19th century Persian nobleman who spent 40 years in prison for his claim. And in that time, he explained that all of these great religions were from the same God. So Christianity, Islam, even the religions that make up Hinduism and so forth, they all reflected different revelations in the course of history. So the primary idea in the Baha'i faith, the primary theological concept, is what we call progressive revelation. That is this idea that when we look at the religions of the world, we see this diversity, but they all represent different times in history when God has spoken to humanity, to different cultures, in different manners and so forth, using different languages, but they all represent the unfoldment of one faith, effectively. And Baha'u'llah said that his revelation was the latest chapter in the unfoldment of that one faith. So that's the basic idea of the Baha'i faith. Baha'u'llah's primary teaching for today, so if you look at each of the religions and each of the revelations, if you will, that have come, they all had primary ideas. Jesus Christ, of course, love thy neighbor as yourself. Muhammad taught not only the unity of the religions that had existed before that, but the unity of God, that God was one and was the only thing really worthy of worship. And now Baha'u'llah's concept, or his main teaching, is the oneness of humanity. Because our capacity has grown in this time in history, we're now ready for a fuller sort of vision of the world and of religion to be able to look at all the great religions as coming from the same God, and that all humanity are really part of one human family. And so all of the efforts of the Baha'i communities around the world, as I said, it's the most diverse community in the world, are really focused on promoting that concept within their local communities through a host of different activities that you'll see in the video that we'll show, and as well as things we'll talk about.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. So you mentioned Baha'u'llah. Could you tell us a little bit more about who he was?
Yeah. So Baha'u'llah was born in a Persian family. Persia is the older name for the cultural name, if you will, for the country that we now call Iran. Persia is really an ancient civilization with an ancient history. Most Persians now are Muslim, but before that they were Zoroastrian. So Persian civilization had one of the earliest sort of religions that taught the oneness of God through the prophet Zoroaster. The three magi who came to see Christ were Zoroastrian. Magi is a name for Zoroastrian religion. So the Persian culture is very ancient and was a great civilization. But since the time of Muhammad, most of the people of that culture became Muslim. And so it was a Muslim culture. So Baha'u'llah was born into a wealthy family in the north of Persia in the 19th century, in 1817. His father was a minister in the court of the king, known as the Shah. And so he was raised in a wealthy environment compared to those around him. Baha'u'llah was an extraordinarily talented person, and when he got to be older, he was asked to join the court of the king, but he declined. He said he was not interested in political life. His mission was higher than that. And so he was married in his late teens, and he and his wife, his father died about that time as well. Baha'u'llah took over the family estate, including that of his younger brothers and so forth, started to manage the affairs of the family. And he became known in that area as the father of the poor, because he devoted almost all his efforts and much of his family's wealth to really caring for the people in that area. His wife and he had chosen to take a section of their home and make it into a children's hospital, which was highly unusual in that period. So Baha'u'llah was devoted to spiritual and social concerns from a young age. When there was a movement within Iran in that time, started by a young merchant prophet known as the Bab. And the Bab means the gate. He was a young merchant prophet who really challenged the entire sort of religious orthodoxy of the time with a claim to be a prophet of God. But what the Bab said is that he wasn't a prophet to bring a revelation for all humanity. He was a prophet to actually prepare the way for one greater than himself. And so the Bab's religion flourished for about 6 years, from 1844 to 1850. And then because of the tumult it was causing on Persian society, the Bab was executed in 1850. And Baha'u'llah had become a recognized follower of the Bab and was taken from a prison, or from his home, literally led in chains to a prison where he was placed. And eventually, because of his belief in the Bab, or his acceptance or recognition of the Bab's revelation was true, he was exiled from his home outside of Persia into the Ottoman Empire. It was in 1863, so 19 years after the Bab had started his teaching, that Baha'u'llah announced that he was the one that the Bab had foretold. But by that time, Baha'u'llah was speaking to a much broader audience. It wasn't just a Persian audience, but rather he was speaking to the Islamic world through the Ottoman Empire and so forth. And then Baha'u'llah would then announce his revelation to the kings of all the time. He sent tablets to all of the great leaders of humanity at that time, including to the American president, to Queen Victoria, Kaiser Wilhelm, who was in charge of the Prussia and so forth, Napoleon, all making his claim, the Pope, making his claim to be bringing a new revelation from God. They're very powerful tablets, remarkable, some of the most remarkable words in the history of religion. And from that point, Baha'u'llah revealed his teachings. The focus began at that point, after 1863, to be what is the message that he is to bring, because the Bab had prepared the way for him, but now it was Baha'u'llah to turn to really announce his revelation and tell us what it was all about. And it was in those tablets and letters and so forth that he talked about this principle that it's now time for all humanity to come together as one reality. He called upon elected leaders, for instance, of America, to regard themselves as the elected leaders of all who dwell on earth, not just their local environments, but all who dwell on earth. And so these tablets again and again talk about world unity, about recognition of all humanity as one. Ye are the leaves of one tree and the fruits of one branch, is Baha'u'llah's famous statement.
Beautiful.
Yeah. So that was a long-winded introduction to Baha'u'llah. But now Baha'u'llah then represents for Baha'is a new revelation of God to humanity, with that as the main teaching.
Thank you. That was very thorough. Would you mind telling us what made you want to become a Baha'i?
Yeah, that's a good question. And because obviously a lot of people don't know of the Baha'i faith, it might seem unusual or the name seems strange. I had a circumstance that was different in that my father had become a Baha'i. I was raised in an otherwise Christian household. I went to Sunday school and so forth. But I, of course, knew of the faith because of my father. And I had a great fondness for it. The Baha'is that I had known it was a very diverse religion. They were very open-minded. And so it actually was very interesting. I was sick one summer. I had an injury that kept me in sort of helmbound for a lot of time. And I began to read what was on the bookshelves. And started reading Baha'i books, and I absolutely fell in love with them. I was mesmerized. They were remarkable to me. And at that time, I was still a young man. I really didn't know much about the world. You know, I had a basic
What was remarkable to you about what you were reading?
I think the vision of world unity was very attractive. The vision of accepting all humanity as one. I had grown up in rural Pennsylvania, which was mostly white. I had a few friends with diverse backgrounds, but I was very attracted to this idea of the diversity of humanity and recognizing us all as one. But the spirituality in the Baha'i writings, and I hadn't been necessarily, I wouldn't have considered myself a religious person or anything else, but the beauty of the words was astounding to me. And I remember reading them and thinking, you know, what is it about these words that make me feel the way I feel? I mean, they're really quite powerful. And I've come to understand that, you know, that's what they are, that they are just very beautiful and powerful words. But I didn't, at that time of my life, I really didn't know much about the world. I didn't know much about, I knew about Christianity. I didn't know anything about Islam. I didn't know anything about Western philosophy or Western philosophers. I hadn't had a science background and so forth. So, you know, I went off to college, and I was really so enamored with the revelation of Baha'u'llah, the teachings of his faith, that I began to see the world and study it through that lens. And I was very interested in finding out how it related to the various philosophies of the day. So I went to Haverford College here locally, gobbled up any course I could take. I was a biology major because I knew I wanted to become a doctor, but I really studied as much history and philosophy and religion as I could to try and get an understanding of what the faith meant. Then went off to medical school and continued to study the faith, and you know, ultimately became very committed as a Baha'i. And I see it now on this side of it, having studied the great faiths of the world, and I almost see Baha'u'llah's revelation in a much clearer context, and how powerful and revolutionary it is, both for religion and for philosophy.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's my answer why I became a Baha'i. Plus, it's really a lot of very nice people.
So, I guess what I would like to ask, where do you see the significance of the Baha'i faith in this time, in this world today? Yeah,
I think that's a really good question. And I think that's what has come to me to be significant as I've now know more about the world. If we look at the world today, we have a tension. The tension is that in reality, the world is one place already. So our economies are interdependent. Financial systems are interdependent. Science is an international endeavor. I could go and I study, if I go to the medical literature to look up something to help care for one of my patients, I'm looking at an international body of knowledge. Our environmental concerns, global warming, this is an international problem. It's not a local problem. And you have people in your generation, not quite your generation, who are, marching in the streets, wanting the leadership of the world to start tackling global problems in a collaborative way, because they look through, if you will, a pure lens, and they don't have the prejudices of the past. Because all of the great civilizations of the past were pulled together with a vision of their common humanity at that time. So European civilization had a vision of its common humanity. That was then transitioned over to the Americas as European civilization came over here. But also, of course, Islamic civilization had that, and Indian civilization had that. And so the challenge now is the tension is that we are living in a global society for all intents and purposes. There's almost no major problem that doesn't have global dimensions, but we're still seeing it through the lens of our sort of nationalistic or regional world issues in which we view as cohesive. So that's the tension. And I think we are absolutely needing to take that step that Baha'u'llah encouraged us to take, which was we need to start having this world-embracing vision and seeing all members of the human family as part of as one people, and beginning to deal with the issues collaboratively. Of course, Baha'u'llah made these statements in the late 19th century, so we're talking maybe from 1870 to 1890, talking about world unity. The world would then go through two great world wars, fighting over resources, basically, World War I and then, of course, World War II, really under this idea that nationalism still was the modus operandi for how the world worked. But it wasn't. And we got wise. We founded the UN. We founded institutions of global regulation, if you will, financial regulation, trade regulation, and so forth. And Europe became one entity. And then we really began to sort of function in that way. And that brought peace to what we call the Western world. So a lot of what we've done since after 1945 is really kind of unfoldment of Baha'u'llah's vision of collaboration. Now, it's not a unity and a uniformity, it's a unity in diversity. So nobody wants or even thinks that it's appropriate for all things to be managed on an international level. But there are certain problems that we need to address that must be handled on an international level, and we need to accept that, including issues of just war and peace, about the ability of one country to wage war on another. Ultimately, I think we're going to need to develop those international institutions that help us solve those problems without the terrible things that happen when war is unleashed upon populations of people around the world.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
My long answers. Yeah.
No, they're thorough answers. I prefer thorough.
Yeah.
So would you like to give us we mentioned your website, sifterofdust.org.
Yeah.
Could you give us a brief overview of the function of your website and the content?
Sure. There are a lot of very nice places to find out more information about the Baha'i Faith on the web.
Right.
There's Bahai.org, which is the international Baha'i website. There's a U.S. Baha'i site and so forth, and they have wonderful information. I felt that there was a gap, though. There's another one, actually, that's made out of California called BahaiTeachings.org, which pushes out information regularly. Huh. I felt for the Philadelphia area, there needed to be something that allowed people to have sort of a virtual space that they could learn about the Baha'i Faith and what is really claims to be the revelation of God for all humanity. It doesn't belong to Baha'is. It belongs to everyone. And so, but most people, the names are going to be unfamiliar, and but the name of Baha'u'llah is going to be unfamiliar. So I wanted to create a virtual space where, at a distance, people could really learn a little bit more about the Baha'i faith on their phones, on their iPads, and then just get familiar with some of the concepts. So we post several times a week, both essays, but also information and content that we pull from the national sites and funnel into the Philadelphia region. And then also just inspirational quotes, so people can start to get a feel or a vibe for that what I was responding to at the age of 17. You know, just the beauty of these writings. It's astonishing, really. And so as you begin to hear them more and more in small snippets, you really begin to get appreciation for the beauty of them. So that's what Sifter of Dust does. It's completely, we don't take anybody's name, we don't advertise, there's no money, there's nothing. It's completely a gift for people. So that's the website I edit. And then we try to direct people. So it's really completely a gift, effectively. There are a lot. We're going to start focusing a little bit more on the Baha'i activities that are public, of which there are a number of activities. We have children's classes, we have devotional gatherings that are public in public spaces, and then we have public talks as well that happen. There's a fair amount of activity on the main line specifically, and also in the city of Philadelphia. So.
Well, Dr. Williams, I would like to thank you again for being here.
Thank you.
Are there any final remarks that you would like to add?
Well, I did bring along a video that we're about to show, and
wonderful.
Yeah, that really it's not Philadelphia based. It's not just Philadelphia Baha'is, although there are some Philadelphia Baha'is who are in it. But it is a video that kind of gives a sense of the texture of Baha'i community life, which is very organic and very beautiful. So we're going to show that at the end. And if people have any other thoughts or questions, please visit sifterofdust.org or the Mainline Baha'i page as well, or any of the other sites that are available on the internet.
Beautiful. So as we close again, that's mainlinebahais.org or sifterofdust.org. We are now going to watch a brief video of Baha'is in action. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you, Dr. Williams, again for being here.
Thank you, Nadia, and thank you all for listening.
Baha'u'llah, or the Blessed Beauty, came as the prophet of the Baha'i faith, with a message that the coming together of the peoples of the earth will lead all of us to peace and prosperity.
The Baha'i vision for the future is that this process of uniting humankind has begun and there's no turning back.
Baha'u'llah's revelation gives us hope that change can come and that we can build a better world together.
And it is not going to be achieved by a sense that if we just wait, God will make it happen, that will just magically appear and we'll all be happy and transcendently harmonious together.
You can't just sort of let the world unfold before you, but that you are an active member in whatever way you can, big or small, contribute to this process.
It's going to take the effort of every single individual working hard and believing in this vision that it can be made possible.
The oneness of humanity is far more than a slogan or an abstract and unattainable ideal. It has profound implications for both personal behavior and for the way society is organized, challenging many current assumptions, revolutionizing our conceptions of the relationships that should exist between the individual, society, and its institutions.
You know, we don't realize that we've been taught that there's a particular way of being human. We've been taught things about white people, we've been taught things about black people, we've been taught things about indigenous populations based on the cultural values or the values that underlie the civilization. Baha'u'llah has asked us to build a different one.
You know, obviously the pivotal principle of the Baha'i faith is the oneness of humanity. So we need to build up a different way that allows all people to participate.
This sort of educational process that very deliberately, very consciously, but very subtly, it erases any kind of distinction that would remain between oppressor and oppressed.
It's a pattern of consultation. It's a pattern of mutual respect. It's a pattern of cultural sharing. And it's also a pattern that takes people that have been on the margins and moves them to the center.
Awareness of the spiritual reality of human beings carries with it the moral requirement that all be given every opportunity to fulfill their potential and to contribute to the advancement of civilization. To this end, we have a twofold mission: to develop within our own community a pattern of life that increasingly reflects the spirit of Baha'i teachings, and to engage with others in a deliberate and collaborative effort to eradicate the ills afflicting our nation.
We are living in an age where there are two simultaneous processes occurring in the world. We have this disintegrating process that is breaking down these age-old institutions and things that no longer suit the needs of humanity in its maturity.
In place of that, being built is a world order which is based on the principles of the oneness of humanity, of the equality of men and women, of the unity of science and religion, and of the belief that all members of all race can make their own contributions.
Both of these processes serve to carry humanity along the path towards its full maturity.
This is an exciting age. I feel very blessed to be here and be a part of this process and just really sharing the love of Baha'u'llah with as many friends as I can.
A rich tapestry of community life that increasingly reflects the sublime teachings of the Blessed Beauty will not emerge of its own accord. The evils of racism, materialism, and moral decadence will be eradicated only by a love that is translated into action. Such actions as deliberately going out of our way to befriend all, appreciating the indispensable contributions of all, and joining hands with all in the creation of a new world.